Welcome back to Race to Win, the sailing podcast. I'm here with sailing champion and quantum sailmaker Will Paxton to discuss the St. Francis One Design Spring Regatta, which he participated in. And it sounds like it was a great day. Good to talk to you again, Will.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this. This is always the opening event of summer. This is the St. Francis Spring Keel.
And there was a pretty good turnout for this race, about 80 boats. Why don't you tell us a bit about the conditions today, Will?
The wind is from the west, from the Golden Gate, but it's got a lot of southerly in it, so there's a lot of left shift. Tide is a very dominant factor in the race course, as it is washing you straight upwind towards the weather mark. You do not want to get on the wrong side of it.
And it was a pretty strong tide, yeah?
Correct. It's about a 2-knot current.
Let's jump right in. We picked a race where Will really had to battle for position.
So here we are, race one, and there's already been a couple of general recalls. And the ebb tide is washing everybody over the line, which is why it's hard to get a clean start. So I finally decided that I was just going to try for a medium start in the middle of the line and not try and win it, because the danger of being over early in the ebb tide is basically ends the race, because there's running very short races because we had no racing the day before. So we went 4 races today. Unfortunately, I ended up misjudging the line when you couldn't see it and just being conservative, so I ended up buried in the second row, and I had to go on a pretty epic mission to dig out of it.
Everybody gets a bad start occasionally, or maybe more than occasionally. But what was really interesting about this to me is how Will fights back after this less than stellar beginning and moves back up through the fleet. In fact, he actually goes on to win this regatta in the end.
So here we are shortly after the start, and we're buried in the second row of a bunch of starboard tackers. And so even though I'm in bad air, I'm not panicking. I'm waiting for a hole to open. I'm not trying to force it through or go on too radical a duck. I waited for a couple other boats that were in worse spot than us to clear out. Again, rule number 1 is patience, don't panic. And that enabled us to do a really clean tack and accelerate out and be in a good spot. Really want to avoid having to do a tack and tack back. You can see the one boat below us there cleared out. Then we ducked one boat and came right up on the wind, sheeted in at speed, and are shooting out into a clear lane, which is what you want to do when you clear out. See, here they come. See, we're already down, we're sheeted in, and here we go. I'm coming back up to meet them as they go across the front of me. I'm not ducking as they go across the front of me. I'm coming up as they come across in front of me. That's the key.
So after this duck, you and this other boat, Libra, are heading upwind, and Libra's actually ahead of you. And you decide to tack long before the ley line. Can you walk me through the thought process for that maneuver?
In an ebb tide, you always want to tack short of the ley line going upwind. In this case, if you're sailing upwind on starboard, you want to be sailing for the port tack ley line, like almost planning on having a short hitch on port at the end to ensure you don't end up overstood and having the tide wash you past the mark. In this case, we tacked shy of the ley line in clear air and had the best VMG all the way to the weather mark.
And you were well ahead, but what happened with that tack right at the mark?
Somebody stood on the jib sheet.
He is not perfect.
Like our tack and duck was well planned, this one was not well planned, because it became a miracle lift. We were almost laying the mark just right, and then it was about 10 boat lengths from the mark or less, and I said, hey, we got to tack twice. And so it was not the most planned maneuver, and therefore it could have gone well, but it did not.
Stuck in a big pile up at the weather mark rounding, Will doesn't give up. He's still battling for position in the race and thinking ahead all the time.
Okay, so this situation is a really classic one in San Francisco Bay, where there's a bunch of boats getting to the weather mark in a knot because it's ebbing and they're all flush there. But as soon as you turn around and point the bow down into the tide, you stop. And so you have a big crowd of boats all of a sudden, and a crowd of boats going downwind is really slow. So everyone's got to look to get a clear lane and get out of that crowd of boats, because they all bunch up when we turn down into the tide. So here I didn't even let my crew put the pole on the kite initially. We did a free-flying set because I wanted to jibe out immediately. But because we had a bad tack and we slowed down, Libra overlapped us on the inside, and we couldn't jibe. And you can see the 2 boats in front of us are trapped going that way because they're trying to stay in clear air, and they sail out of the wind against the shore and start jibing out. And then they sail under our bad air, and we all catch up to each other again. And this is where we all start jibing and heading out on a reach, fighting for clear air. But it's a really classic situation where all the boats round in a knot and come to a stop against the tide and bunch up.
When you're in a pack of boats downwind and this reaching duel starts, a common thing is to hear people yelling, proper course, which is a rule that isn't very well understood. So I ask Will to elaborate.
Proper course is the most efficient heading to get to the mark. Proper course is not aiming at the mark. As we all know, you have to sail VMG angles or 2 shifts. So if you're not aiming at the mark, no one can yell at you and say, well, you're not aiming at the mark, you're not sailing proper course. Proper course is whatever you think is the fastest way to get there. The lured boat has lots of leeway to determine what proper course is. It's very hard to prove otherwise. I mean, if you're going downwind, for instance, and a boat sailed up behind us into leeward and then tried to luff us to the point our spinnakers couldn't fly, you would say then for sure that they were luffing you above proper course and have rights to do that. So proper course would then be determined by what is the proper VMG angle to be sailing to the mark, not necessarily the heading at the mark.
Now you know what to say when someone's screaming proper course at you. So remember, Will is still trying to battle his way up through the fleet. Let's take a look at his next maneuver when he's finally going to get by Libra.
Here we're trying to engineer a pass. We're playing chicken with El Raton, who is reaching up and reaching up and reaching up and looking for an opportunity to try and pass both of us to weather, even though both lead boats are trying to resist going up because we're going out into worse and worse tide. And so it's just a big game of chicken. And Libra eventually here is going to give up and let us both go by on our silly reaching duel over the top of him.
So you can see Will has come up behind Libra now, and he is getting ready to move in for the kill here.
Right. So you can see we're in a position to pass Libra, but we don't really have it sealed yet, and I see a set of waves coming. So you can see everybody reach down and make a little adjustment just before the wave hits and hike to weather. And what we did is we put the bow up and accelerated just as the waves hit. And Libra did not compensate for the waves coming, so our wind shadow hit them just when they hit the wave, and they came to a stop. We went shooting by right over them without having to defend a luff from them. There they go, hitting those waves, and their kite collapses. Boom. And we're gone. With just opportunistic timing with the wave coming at us. And you can see our sails go back out and the pull square up again.
So remember, Will battled through this and actually went on to win the whole series, and he had some advice for us at the end here.
Yeah, I think the whole trick to this race was right out of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is don't panic. We kept our heads even after we had a bad start, and we waited for an opportunity to develop. And we didn't panic at the top when everybody collapsed on us and kept fighting for clear air and to make an opportunity to move forward. You don't have to win the regatta in the first race. That was pretty much the strategy, is not to try and win the regatta in the first race, but still be in it to win it to the end.
So you're still trying to pretend that it was your strategy not to win all the races? No one's buying it, Will.
It's my strategy not to lose in the first race. Peaches sailed a really amazing race here. We tied him in the third race, and we only beat him by a boat length going across the finish line at the end. It was a very tough, tight series.
I like to give Will a hard time, but he sailed an excellent race in a very competitive fleet. I have to really work hard to find races that he doesn't win, so that's why I like to tease him a little bit. Thanks again so much, Will. As always, you were awesome. And I want to put a call out there to anybody else that might be interested in being featured on our podcast. We're specifically looking for sailmakers that want to maybe build their business a little bit, professional sailors. Just send me an email, julia.berg@racecues.com. I would love to hear from you, and I will see you next time. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can find more on our website, www.racecues.com/podcast.